At Sierra, discover top workout gear at incredible prices, which might lead to another discovery. Your headphones haven't been connected this whole time. Awkward. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
This episode is brought to you by FX's The Beauty Official Podcast. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's hottest new series, The Beauty, taking you behind the scenes with its amazing stars as they discuss the show's most jaw-dropping moments. Featuring Evan Peters, Anthony Ramos, Jeremy Pope, Ashton Kutcher, Rebecca Hall, Bella Hadid, Meghan Trainor, Isabella Rossellini, Jessica Alexander, and Ari Grainer. Search FX's The Beauty wherever you listen to podcasts.
This is Jay Scott, and you are listening to The Hook, the Ultimate Rock Community Podcast. Welcome aboard. Welcome to the very first episode. Hope everybody's doing well. I wish we would have started this a few weeks earlier, but life gets in the way sometimes, and there's just things out of your control that keep you from doing what you want to do. I'll get to all that at the end of the episode, how I'm moving forward. Going to give you a little bit about what happened. But let's dive into the first episode of the podcast, which is an introduction to you as to who we are, and what we're going to do. So, like every great rock song has a hook that sucks you in. Every rock fan has a moment, whether it's a song, an album, a band, a performance, that got you hooked on rock and roll. We all have that moment. And that is really the essence of the show, along with it being a community. The Ultimate Rock Community Podcast will be very interactive. We want everyone to share their stories. If you feel comfortable enough and you've got something to say, we want you on the podcast. I may reach out to you if I think that you have something great to share. But it will be that community. It will be that feeling that you're hanging out with your friends and you're talking about your memories of when you were a kid, about being introduced to rock, whether it was from a sibling, a friend, an uncle, just turn on the TV or the radio. So what's my story? When I was growing up in the suburbs of Chicago, my grandfather was a piano player. My grandfather used to play piano in the speakeasies during the time of Prohibition and the time afterwards. And he had a piano in his basement. And when I would stay overnight there, whether it was, once a month or every other month, I would wake up on a Saturday morning or Sunday morning, and my grandfather was playing the piano in the basement. They had a finished basement, and they had this baby grand piano that is now a family heirloom that is still in our family. And my grandfather was the type of piano player that would hit the keys really hard. And his playing sounded similar to what, like thunder, I used to call it when I was a kid, because it would rumble the house. And of course, I would wake up as he'd be playing at 8 o'clock in the morning, or even earlier than that, or a tad bit later. And I'd walk into the kitchen where my grandmother was making breakfast, and I would just sit at the kitchen table and listen to my grandfather play big band music, Liberace, Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Dean Martin, all that style of music. And he'd come up the stairs when he was done, with the cigarette hanging from his mouth or hanging from his lip. He'd greet me with a good morning. He'd have his black coffee all ready for him, and we would start our day. But the piano was really the very first instrument that made me aware of music because of my grandfather. The very first time I heard it, the very first time I saw him play, I was mesmerized. because I was not familiar with music at such an early age. I mean, I'm talking like 3, 4, 5 years old. Of course, my parents played music, albeit nothing that connected with me, whether it was Barry Manilow or Barbra Streisand. And my dad listened to AM radio, country music, Eddie Rabbitt, Conway Twitty, Johnny Cash, Glenn Campbell. But nothing resonated with me, nothing connected. Until my brother, who was 3.5, 4 years older than me, brought a record home from school that a friend had borrowed him. And he put the record on the record player, and he dropped the needle on the vinyl. And the first song I heard, the first rock song I heard, was piano in the beginning. It had piano in the intro. And that song was Don't Stop Believin' by Journey. So here I am, late 1981, early 82, 6 or 7 years old, hearing this piano coming out of the speakers, familiar with the sound, the tone of the instrument. And then I heard Steve Perry sing. And I had never heard anybody sing like that. And he's called the voice for a reason. And then I heard Neil Schon play his guitar. And I had never heard guitar like that before. Keep in mind, I was used to listening to AM radio and country music and Barbra Streisand and Barry Manilow. So I was mesmerized. And as we listened to the rest of the record, you heard Keep On Running, and you heard Stone in Love, Open Arms, Who's Crying Now? Open Arms was probably the most popular song at that time, and probably exceeded popularity of Don't Stop Believin'. I think it's kind of reversed right now. I think more people are familiar with Don't Stop Believin' due to various reasons, whether it's The Sopranos or whether it's your favorite sports team playing that during a playoff run or a championship run. But that was my first connection with music. And then, of course, Journey had the video game come out after that, and they were just, at that time, probably the biggest or close to rock band. Now, they weren't on the harder side. We all know that. But they were, I don't know if you want to call them pop back then. I don't know if they were pop. Maybe. I know Open Arms, had a big crossover appeal. And anytime you went to a Journey song back in the day and they played that song, every woman, girl would scream because they loved the song. But it was, at the time, it was the edgiest thing that I had heard. Until about 4 months later, 5 months later, my brother had brought home a cassette that a friend had made for him. And before my brother had a boombox or a stereo, we had like these tape players that were about the length of a shoebox. And on one side was the keys, whether you hit play, record, fast forward, rewind. And then it would open up and you'd put the cassette in, you play it and have that one speaker. And it sounded horrible. But nevertheless, that's what we had to work with back then. So we put this tape in, and this was my introduction to Judas Priest. Way more edgier than Journey. And there was only 2 songs on the tape, and that was You Got Another Thing Coming and the live version of Diamonds and Rust, which I believe was from Unleashed in the East. And again, mesmerizing. This was way more edgier and way heavier than Journey. Rob Halford's voice was way different than Steve Perry's. The songs were just more like anthems. And again, I wanted more. My hunger for more music like this kept growing. So in between the next moment, a few things happened. One was there was this radio station called WMET that was local to Chicago that played hard rock music. And they played everything from Greg Kinban to Genesis to Quiet Riot to Led Zeppelin. And I don't remember if I knew who the bands were. I kind of just knew the songs and the melodies. And, back in the day, you didn't have a scroll at the bottom of your stereo that told you what you were listening to. And, you would try to hear the DJ say who it was. You not always remembered it, but that was your way of getting music. And in the winters in Chicago, which are very cold and brutal sometimes, my brother and I would just sit on the bedroom floor and listen to WMET. The next moment, a couple months later, another one of my brother's friends, he must have had really cool friends because they were always giving him this music, borrowed him Van Halen 1. And my only knowledge of Van Halen at that time was listening at the age of 7 years old, an interview with David Lee Roth on WMET, the radio station. And you can imagine what that was like, because we all know what David Lee Roth is like. So I was home. My brother was out with my father. My mother was home. She was cleaning the kitchen. So I went in, I grabbed this record, and I grabbed the big headphones that we had back in the day that looked like, I don't know, something you wore in a spaceship, if you were like an astronaut. And you had the big plug, that you put in the stereo. I took my mom's Barry Manilow record off, and I put on Van Halen 1. And I grew up in the era of Star Wars, right? Young kid, seeing all these special effects, all these sound effects in the movie Star Wars. Very impressionable at the time. The coolest thing a kid ever, could see at that time. So I dropped the needle down on the record, put the headphones on, and I hear the introduction to Running with the Devil. And we all know what that sounds like. And I was, again, mesmerized. Like, what is this? And then you heard the song kick in. You heard David Lee Roth scream like a banshee. Eddie Van Halen's whistling guitar solo. It was incredible. And then we all know what came after that, which was Eruption. And I had heard guitar players, and I had heard Neil Schon. I had heard the guys in Judas Priest, obviously the ones on the radio that I heard, but I couldn't identify with who they are. But Eruption was completely different. It was out of this world. I did not know if someone was actually playing it, if it was, I didn't know what it was. If someone was playing it, I kept thinking to myself, how is he doing that? How is he making his guitar sound like that? It was incredible. And then You Really Got Me kicked in, and I realized why I subconsciously grabbed the headphones that I didn't want my mother to hear. Because during the break after the solo, I got to experience at a young age what sexual innuendo, or whatever you want to call it, scandalous moment during the song that's, of course, not in the original Kinks version. And, of course, I didn't know it was scandalous until years later when I was like, oh, wow, they were kind of doing some funky stuff in that song. But at 7, 8 years old, you kind of didn't really know what was going on. Again, it was a different time. You held on to your innocence a lot longer back in the day. So Journey, Judas Priest, Van Halen. I remember seeing the Iron Maiden poster at a friend's house who had an older brother, a top to bottom wall poster of the cover of Number of the Beast. I didn't know whether to think it was cool or whether to be scared out of my mind. It was all just coming at me, and I wanted more. And then a very important moment happened, which was the U.S. Festival. 1983, summer of 1983, 7 bands on the bill: Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, Triumph, Scorpions, Van Halen. And this was the first visual that I had. I mean, I'd heard all the, these bands. I never saw what Judas Priest looked like. I never saw what Quiet Riot looked like. I never saw what Van Halen looked like. So when all these bands were playing, this was a whole new experience, being exposed to the visual aspect of music, because the visual is just as important as the actual music sometimes. So this was on a platform called On TV. This is pre-cable. And I don't know if this was just local to Chicago, but what it was, basically, you had your regular TV channels, and then there was this box. You got this box that you put above your TV, and it was like a switch. And you switched it from regular TV to On TV. And they showed regular movies. I think Time Bandits was one of them. Star Wars, Cat People, Valley Girl, I think, was another one. Happy Birthday to Me, which was this weird horror movie. So they were going to have I think the U.S. Festival is broken up into two parts. I think there was one weekend where 1 month they had 4 days, and then there was 3 days on another one. So they were going to show the Heavy Metal Day on the Saturday. That's what it was called, the Heavy Metal Day. And yes, all those bands were considered heavy metal back in the early 80s. So I don't remember Motley Crue being on the televised portion of the broadcast. I do remember Quiet Riot. I don't know if I missed Motley Crue or they were cut because of time constraints, but Quiet Riot was the first band that I saw that day. And they were, people don't remember, not to get off track, but they were the first band out of the LA scene to really break through and gain popularity. You know, when you think back of what the early 80s was in popular music, it was new wave. It was, of course, your pop music, but bands like Duran Duran, bands like Culture Club, that was what was running the show back then. And it all seemed to change after this day, because after this day, Quiet Riot exploded with Come On Feel the Noise, and then the song Metal Health, which was the title track from the album. And they were huge. I want to say their record was number one at one point, which was unheard of for a rock band to have, especially with very limited radio and very limited access to what they were doing. So Quiet Riot came on, blew me away. Second band I saw was Judas Priest, which for me, seeing Rob Halford, seeing Glenn Tipton, KK Downing, putting the visual aspect to the music that I heard months ago was an enormous moment for me. And Rob Halford could sing like no one's business. And they were incredible. And in fact, I think on the remastered reissue of the Screaming for Vengeance, I think it's an anniversary edition maybe, the second disc is either the live show on CD or a DVD of the show. I highly recommend picking it up because it's extremely well packaged and it's extremely well done. So Judas Priest, then on to Ozzy. And I believe this was the first show with Jakey Lee after Randy Rhoads had passed and Brad Gillis had replaced Randy Rhoads to finish up the Diary of a Madman tour. I don't know, it may have been a few shows into it, but I think this was the very first show, the introduction of Jakey Lee. I could be wrong. And Ozzy at the time was considered like the second coming of the devil. I mean, I had to sneak records of Ozzy into my house as I got older, and Ozzy was pretty much banned from me ever being able to play it. It was just, now he's a pop culture icon, which I can't even express to you how just incredible that is. So Ozzy plays, Triumph comes on, and Triumph was really good. They probably were the most non-hard rock heavy metal band of that day. I mean, they were hard rock, definitely. They were considered heavy metal, but they definitely weren't. They were a three-piece band that was excellent. They had songs like Lay It on the Line and Fight the Good Fight. My personal favorite, World of Fantasy, but they were awesome. Triumph or Scorpions, which was the next act, were probably the two best bands that day. And Scorpions, of course, was on the Blackout tour. You know, they had songs like No One Like You, the title track Blackout, Can't Live Without You. Just a really great album. And then, of course, the headline act, Van Halen. And this was my first time seeing Van Halen play and seeing them visually. And David Lee Roth comes out. Romeo Delight was the first song. And they were incredibly sloppy. I didn't know that back then. I was just excited to see him. Now, when you watch old video, you see how just, incoherent they were. I mean, the first song, Romeo Delight, David Lee Roth forgets the words. And they came on late, as the story goes, because as all these bands were playing throughout the day, they were partying throughout the day. And when they were expected to go on after Scorpions, they were not in the condition to get up on stage. They had to wait. And people were waiting for an hour or two for Van Halen to appear on the stage. Nevertheless, it was still an incredible moment. But Eddie Van Halen and Michael Anthony, Alex Van Halen, it was just an incredible show. My brother and I watched this. We barely moved the whole time. You couldn't pause things back in the day, so we had to wait between acts when there was a break to go get our lunch or to go to the bathroom or do whatever. But we didn't leave the house. And our parents let us watch it, which was really cool. And they kind of left us alone until my mother came in late at night. Because remember, this was on the West Coast, so they're 2 hours behind us. So when Van Halen was on, which was a couple hours late, it was like 11 o'clock our time, 12 o'clock, midnight maybe. So my mom comes in after us being in the living room all day watching this. And David Lee Roth has a wardrobe change and comes out with assless chaps, which I didn't know those pants existed when I was 7, 8 years old, 9 years old. I think 83, so I was 8. So he's dancing around with assless chaps, jumping around, doing kicks, doing splits, whatever. My mom's walking in. She goes, "What are you guys watching?" And we're like, the U.S. Festival. And she looks at the TV and David Lee Roth shaking his ass. And she's like, "What are you boys watching?" And it was like no big deal. We just looked at my mother and said, "It's Van Halen, Mom. It's David Lee Roth." She's like, "What does he have on?" I go, "We don't know, but this is really cool." And if you ever have a chance to look at video footage of the show, it's on YouTube. I highly suggest you do watch it because it's amazing. But that day was a big moment for me in my journey into rock music, no pun intended. And what came after that was a different experience because instead of just listening, there became more visual outlets. The same on TV that had the U.S. Festival began showing rock videos in the morning. So my brother and I would get up for school. My parents would get us up. And we were motivated because we wanted to watch the music videos because they weren't showing movies at that time. They had like a 2-hour block of rock videos. So we would get dressed, we'd eat our breakfast, and we would wait for my mom to drive us to school. She was getting ready for work. And we had about, maybe 20 minutes, 15, 20, 25 minutes. And we would catch about maybe 4 or 5 videos. And we saw Def Leppard, Pyromania. We saw Motley Crue, Looks That Kill. Rat started to come around at that time with Round and Round. Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It. Night Ranger, I think, had a video, Don't Tell Me You Love Me. But just Breaking the Law from Judas Priest. Whatever. I mean, it was a huge moment because we started to be enticed by the visual aspect of the music. And the music of the 80s, whether it's the early 80s where it's more raw, to the end of the 80s where it kind of lost its way, the visual aspect was always important, more so than the 70s. Of course, you had bands like Kiss and bands like Queen, which were both visual acts. There were a few others. But pretty much all throughout the 80s were bands and artists that were playing good music, but also the visual was very important. I mean, you think about those Twisted Sister videos, and you think about the Motley Crue video for Too Young to Fall in Love or Looks That Kill, or you think about the Rat videos with Milton Berle, and you think about the early Van Halen videos with Pretty Woman, into Jump. I mean, when you look at that video for Jump, and you look at the camera angle of that video, where it's slightly above or slightly below the point of view, the eye point of view, that changed the way videos were filmed. Look back at that video. The song was a big song at the time. It's not one of my favorite Van Halen songs, but if you look at the influence of how they shot that video and what came after, it was huge. It was so big. But the visual aspect of music was very important. I remember them showing the video from the Escape Tour by Journey, the live show, where I think Steve Perry has a yellow and black top, but they showed that. That was my first experience of seeing Journey and what they looked like. So that was a very important point for my generation, for kids my age, because it wasn't just like staring into a speaker. You had the visual outlet. And then, of course, MTV came, which, again, changed the game. I don't know. MTV may have already been in... they may have already had started. I think because they did show the U.S. festival. So I think they started in like 82, but we didn't have cable back then. We just had the on TV. So when we switched to cable, we had MTV, but MTV was still playing a lot of new wave and a lot of punk, like The Clash and Culture Club and Duran Duran and Men at Work and all the bands that were popular at that time. And it really wasn't until the U.S. festival that things started to change. You started to see Def Leppard, Pyromania. You started to see all the videos that on TV was playing. Now cable with MTV was playing. And it really took off. There are a lot of bands that owe their success to MTV because of that visual outlet that it produced and helped them with. On the same side, MTV owes a lot to those bands of the 80s. The Def Leppards, the Bon Jovis, the Motley Crues, the Ozzies, you name it. Anyone that was popular and big in the 80s, early 90s, helped build MTV. And they would not be in existence today without those bands. That's a fact. So as I moved on, through my life and got older and experienced new artists and new bands, I always go back to that beginning for me. When I heard The Journey and I heard the Judas Priest, Van Halen, Iron Maiden, Motley Crue, Quiet Riot, all those bands. As I grew into, 5th, 6th grade, 4th grade, there was a radio station called WVVX, RPM, Real Precious Metal, that only came on at 7 or 8 o'clock because the signal was not strong and they played Spanish music during the day. WMET, the radio station that had introduced me to rock, had changed formats to like some new wave jazz type deal. So this radio station only came on, and after dinner, instead of watching TV, which there wasn't that many channels back in the day, even with cable, I'd go in my room and I would listen to this radio station. And I had a boombox at that time. I had saved up money from paper route. So before I went to bed, I would put the radio on the other side of the bed that, was like between the bed and the wall. And I would put it there and I would put my headphones down there with it. I'd wait for my mom to come tuck me in. She'd leave and I'd turn on the radio, plug in my headphones, and I'd listen till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning to this music and all these bands. And of course, the next day I was dead tired, falling asleep in class and trying to keep my eyes open. But it was worth it because I loved it and I just wanted more. I couldn't get enough of that music. So that's my story. And I think a lot of people who are going to listen who are listening now have their story too. It might be similar, it might be completely different, but let's hear it. What hooked you on rock and roll? I think it'll be interesting to hear different people's stories, different people's perspective, what's familiar in our stories, what's different. I love talking about music, whether it's at a bar, at a party, at dinner, wherever. I love connecting with people who have a strong passion for music like myself. And that's where this podcast came from, my passion for music. And where are we going to go from here? What should you expect? Like I said in the beginning, the word community in the Ultimate Rock Community podcast, The Hook, is the most important word. Because we want to interact, we want to have fun with each other. We want to hear what everyone's got to say, right? We're going to keep evolving. We're going to keep adding new things and new ideas. If you have ideas for us, please share. Send me a DM on Twitter. Sooner or later, we're going to get to an Instagram page. Sooner or later, we might get to a Facebook page. I don't know if I want to do that because every experience I've had with a music site on Facebook has been an absolute train wreck. And I don't have time to monitor a Facebook page 24/7 because it just gets out of hand. I mean, if you ever want to see what the end of the world looks like, go on the Steve Perry fan page, Facebook page. And that's what hell looks like. I swear. It's horrible. I'm not going to get into it, but it's just not what I want to do. I don't want to monitor something like that if it should become something like that. What we're not going to be is a critic. We're not going to tell you what to like, what not to like. There are plenty of douchebags on social media, on YouTube, that tell you what's great and what's not and why not to like it. Music is all subjective. Everybody has their own taste. Everybody has their own palette that they like to listen to. We don't want to be an elitist group of people as we move forward that, snubs our nose at what you like or what you think's cool. If you want to listen to King Diamond or Slayer or Death Angel or whatever it is, go right ahead, man. Whatever knocks you out. Different strokes for different folks. If you want to listen to Poison or Warrant or talk about that band, talk about it. But just be respectful for everybody. One of the biggest pet peeves and one of the biggest things that upsets me is when someone insults someone else's music tastes. And it's crap, to be quite honest with you. Because people's music is like their religion, right? It's connected with them. It is a part of them. It helps motivate them. It helps them get through tough times. Songs have a different meaning to each individual. And when you tell someone that what they like, what they feel is part of them is bad, people are going to push back. People are going to be pissed. Don't do that. Enjoy your music. Let other people enjoy their music. You don't have to like it. Maybe it hasn't connected with you. And that's the other thing, too. What people don't realize is timing is just as important to music as what you hear, right? You may not like something when you're 15 years old. You may not like Led Zeppelin, let's say. Let's say Led Zeppelin didn't resonate with you when you were 15. You have some more life experiences. You grow up a little bit. You're a little bit more mature with your tastes. 5 years later, 10 years later, someone plays a Led Zeppelin song that you didn't like. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, this sounds really cool. Who is this? This is Led Zeppelin? Oh, wow, I thought I didn't like Led Zeppelin. Next song they play, Led Zeppelin. Oh, wow, this is really good, too. Sooner or later, you're buying all their records, and you love them. Now you're a diehard Zeppelin fan. So music, again, is a lot about where you're at in life. Something that you heard when you were 15 or 20 years old, you listen to now in your 40s. It doesn't connect with you anymore. So I just wish people would stop that. Let people listen to whoever they want to listen to. Enjoy whatever you got on your iPod or in your stereo, and just carry on. So I hope you enjoy what we're about to do. We look forward to producing some episodes with you. We're going to be doing classic album spotlights. We're going to be promoting a lot of new music. We're going to be having discussions with fellow rock fans such as yourself. If you want to, like I said, if you want to get on and have a discussion, please let me know. But it's going to be fun, and I'm really looking forward to interacting with all of you. Now, to give you a little quick update as we end the show as to why we were delayed, I had a health issue about a month ago. Ended up in the hospital, had surgery, and had some complications after the surgery that made me tired, and I was sleeping a lot and just didn't have it in me to get this going when I wanted to get it going. But that's all past, hopefully, as I continue to get stronger and better every day. And again, I appreciate all the messages, all the people reaching out, all the people checking in on me. You know who you are. Thank you from the bottom of my heart with all that. But let's move forward. Let's get this going. I hope you all enjoy listening. I hope you have the patience to evolve with us, because what you hear today is not necessarily what you're going to hear down the road. We're going to get better at this. We are not professionals. So, you know, if something is not edited correctly, or I say something that may not sound right, just, you know, let's not get all bent out of shape, and let's not, you know, ruin it for everybody. But expect more, and I look forward to it. So you guys take care of yourself and keep rocking, and we will see you next time on The Hook.
Well, the holidays have come and gone once again, but if you've forgotten to get that special someone in your life a gift, well, Mint Mobile is extending their holiday offer of half off unlimited wireless. So here's the idea. You get it now, you call it an early present for next year. What do you have to lose? Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Limited time 50% off regular price for new customers. Upfront payment required. $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan. Taxes and fees extra. Speeds may slow after 50 gigabytes per month when network is busy. See terms.